All right, let's dive into this pile of articles about blood pressure. Looks like we're tackling systolic and diastolic readings today. What those numbers actually mean, and you know what they mean for us, right?
Right.
Okay, so think of it this way. Your heart is like a pump, and then all your blood vessels, they're like the pipes, right?
Right.
So systolic pressure, that's like the pressure in the pipes when your heart is squeezing, pushing the blood through.
Yeah, it's the top number, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then you've got your diastolic pressure. That's when your heart is chilling out between beats.
It's the pressure between the pumps,
Mhm.
and that interplay between those two is really what gives us a good picture of how your heart's doing overall.
That makes sense.
Both those numbers, they're important, but I've noticed we often hear more about systolic pressure, especially as we get a little older. And this article from TheEMTSpot's, which, by the way, is super credible on this stuff, they point that out too.
Okay, so why is that? What makes systolic pressure more, I don't know, more important as we age?
Well, you know how a garden hose, like a brand new one,
Mm.
is nice and flexible?
Yeah.
And then you leave it out in the sun for a couple of years, it gets all stiff and kind of cracked.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Our arteries could be kind of like that.
Yeah.
Over time, they naturally lose some of their elasticity. They get a little stiffer. And that stiffness, it makes it harder for the heart to pump blood effectively, and that can lead to a higher systolic pressure.
So it's like if systolic pressure is the force of the water pushing against the hose, a stiffer hose means more pressure.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And this is where it gets really important for us. High blood pressure. Doctors call it hypertension. It's often called the silent killer because people might not even realize they have it until it causes a serious problem.
Like a heart attack or a stroke, right? Because I know this article mentions some pretty scary stuff that can happen if you have high blood pressure, heart disease, stroke, kidney problems.
Yeah. And another thing I thought was really interesting that the article touched on was this trend of isolated systolic hypertension. Apparently, it's becoming more common, especially as people get older, and that's where your systolic is high, but your diastolic stays normal.
Interesting. Why is that happening more these days? Is there any, known reason?
They think it's probably tied to that arterial stiffness we were just talking about. As we age, our arteries just don't bounce back quite as easily. And that can show up as isolated systolic hypertension.
That makes a lot of sense. But doesn't that mean then that diastolic pressure is more important when you're younger?
That's a really good point. And yeah, you're right. In younger people, if their diastolic reading is high, that could be like an early warning sign that something's not quite right. It might mean the blood vessels aren't relaxing the way they should between beats, and in the long run, that can really put extra strain on the heart.
So it's like we're seeing a potential problem early on.
Exactly. And while both types of hypertension are serious, seeing isolated high diastolic pressure in a younger person, that's something to definitely talk to a doctor about.
For sure. So we've established that high blood pressure, whether it's systolic, diastolic, or both, is not something we want. But what can we actually do about it? I mean, if we find out we have high blood pressure, what then?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Knowing is half the battle, but then what do we do?
Right.
Luckily, these articles, especially this one from the TheEMTSpot's, they really get into the lifestyle changes that can make a difference.
Okay, so, what can our listeners start doing, today to get a handle on their blood pressure? What are we talking about here?
Well, for starters, diet. We all know diet's important, but it's not just about avoiding salty snacks,
Right.
although that helps. This Dr. Michael Greger, I think the article mentioned him, he suggests that, get this, by just eating more fruits and veggies and cutting back on meat, you can potentially lower your blood pressure by 11 points.
11 points? Seriously?
Yeah,
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, it really shows you the power of food, right?
it really does. And it's not just about what we put in our bodies. It's about how we move them, too.
Yeah.
Regular exercise, it doesn't have to be anything crazy. Just a brisk walk a few times a week can make a world of difference for your heart.
Like giving your heart a workout.
Exactly. And you know what else is huge?
What?
Stress.
Oh, tell me about it. Stress is the worst. I swear, I can feel my heart racing sometimes when I'm stressed out.
You're preaching to the choir. Chronic stress is a huge contributor to high blood pressure.
Yeah.
The article talked about a few things people can try. Meditation, deep breathing, even just getting out in nature.
It's amazing how much that stuff can help.
Totally.
So it sounds like it's all about making healthy choices just part of your routine.
Right. Exactly.
But what happens when, like, what if those lifestyle changes aren't enough? Is
Hmm.
that where medication comes in?
Yeah, sometimes medication is necessary, and it can get kind of complicated because there are a lot of different blood pressure medications out there.
Yeah, the article mentioned like diuretics and beta blockers and ACE inhibitors. It's a lot to keep track of.
It really is. It's
Yeah.
like each type of medication is a specific tool designed to like target a specific thing and how your blood pressure is regulated.
Okay.
Like diuretics, those help your body get rid of excess sodium in water, which in turn can lower your blood pressure.
So they're like releasing some of the pressure in those pipes, right?
Exactly. And then you have things like beta blockers. They work by slowing down your heart rate,
Okay.
which reduces how forcefully your heart beats. So it's a different approach. But same goal, lower that blood pressure.
Fascinating. So how does a doctor decide which tool, or I guess which medication, is the right one for someone?
It really depends on the person, their age, their overall health, any other conditions they might have, their lifestyle. It's all a part of the decision-making process.
So it's really individualized.
Yeah.
Wow. You know, that actually makes me think of another thing the article mentioned, which was keeping track of your blood pressure at home. Have you
Mhm.
noticed how those at-home readings can be kind of all over the place?
Oh, totally. Getting an accurate reading at home is way harder than people realize. There are so many things that can throw it off.
Like what?
The type of monitor you're using, your posture, even if you've had caffeine recently, it can all mess with the reading.
Oh, wow. I had no idea. So, like, are there any tips for making sure you get the most accurate reading possible when you're at home?
The article had some good advice. For one, use a cuff that fits properly.
Yeah.
And always rest for a few minutes before taking your reading.
Okay. Oh,
And make sure your back is supported and your feet are flat on the floor.
wow. I would never thought about that. Those little things really make a difference.
Apparently so. It's all about like minimizing the variables. And speaking of consistency, the article also said it's important to take your readings at the same time every day.
That makes sense. But what about if your blood pressure just naturally fluctuates throughout the day? Is there like an ideal time to take it?
You know, it seems like morning readings tend to be a bit higher for a lot of folks,
Mm,
but honestly, the best thing to do is talk to your doctor.
of course, they'll know what's up.
Yeah, they can tell you when to take your readings, morning, night, whatever, based on your health, medications, you name it.
Exactly. They're on our team.
Totally.
Speaking of, I did see that the article mentioned something about preeclampsia, I think it's called. Something that can happen during pregnancy.
Oh, right. Yeah, preeclampsia. It's basically when blood pressure shoots up suddenly during pregnancy, and it can be really dangerous if it's not caught early.
Yikes.
Yeah, it's definitely something to be aware of, especially for anyone listening who's expecting or thinking about starting a family.
Definitely. It just goes to show how important understanding blood pressure is at any age.
100%.
So we covered a lot today. Systolic versus diastolic, how big of a deal lifestyle choices are, those at-home readings. What would you say is the biggest thing you hope our listeners take away from all of this?
Honestly.
Hmm.
I think it's remembering that both those numbers, systolic and diastolic, they're both part of the big picture of your heart health. They go hand in hand.
They're a team.
Exactly. And look, high blood pressure is a serious thing, but the good news is we have some control. What we eat, how active we are, even how we handle stress, those everyday things can make a huge difference.
It's like we're investing in our well-being one choice at a time.
I love that.
And hey, when in doubt, talk to your doctor, right?
Always.
This has been so interesting. We've learned a lot about high blood pressure, that's for sure. But it does make you wonder, what about if your blood pressure is always on the low side? Is that something to be concerned about too? Something to think about. And maybe even ask your doctor at your next checkup. All right, thanks for joining us for this deep dive. And until next time, stay curious and take care of yourselves.